Yeah, I mean, if we look at, just to use one example, and now there's all this Acorn stuff going around too, which doesn't help things, but if we look at the Al Franken election, I mean, that election was counted and recounted. It was won by about 200 votes, Bev, so we can see, just how easy it is to steal just a few votes and change the entire spectrum of things. I want to ask this question to both you and Kathleen here. I heard from Wayne Madsen, who's a former intelligence officer and now a whistleblower and a reporter, that it was George Soros covertly who got in, as you just mentioned, and hijacked the electronic voting movement, if you want to call it that. Have you seen that, or have you found any information into that regard?
Well, there has certainly been funding from Soros and some others on the Democratic side. There's a project called the Secretary of State Project, where Soros and some of his other cronies funded a project to put their own selections as Secretary of State in each state. Now, the Secretary of State controls the running of elections. If elections were public and truly publicly observed, it wouldn't matter who's the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
What the problem is they're seeing this as, okay, we want to have our particular political message in office. We, too, want to control the vote. So the issue here, and it's very unpopular to bring this up to either Democrats or Republicans, the issue is public control.
Yeah. Kathleen, did you want to...
Well, Soros also has his hand in Acorn and Move On, so that is where the message gets hijacked. He's this guy that's putting a lot of money into these organizations is supposed to be for the little guy. So people tend to want to believe them and trust them, and that's the problem. There is no place for trust in elections. So if Soros is part of it, I would be very, very wary of anything.
Well, and that wasn't the only movement that he hijacked. I mean, this is all about controlling the message, something both you ladies know about quite well. What the doctor is going to tell us here when he joins us in about 10 minutes is that they found that the electronic voting machines really required blind faith, quote unquote, on behalf of the public. Kathleen?
Absolutely. Well, that's what we had here, and that's what Bev and I have been fighting against from day one is you can't have trust in elections. There has to be transparency. Otherwise, there is no election. There is no integrity. How can you know that? And blind trust is insane in an election. I don't understand why people think that's okay. In fact, here in Texas, I attended one of the elections, and one of the poll workers said secrecy is good because it protects the integrity of the vote.
Right. They always try that one. You don't want people to know who you're voting for. That's your right to keep that a secret, et cetera, et cetera. Bev, I mean, didn't the Founding Fathers say, whatever you do, just have blind faith in the government and all of their agents?
If you read the quotes from the Founding Fathers, nothing could be further from what we're doing right now. In fact, they say, if, we're not attentive, wolves will take over the government, And let me mention that there's a couple of other hijacks of the message that have gone on that Germany sidestepped very wisely. One is, it's the touchscreens that are a problem. Now, that was a very industry-friendly talking point. If we get rid of the touchscreens, but we have the other computerized voting machines, which count in concealment, then everything will be all right. Well, no. Electronic counting is all concealed. And so it's not okay just because you get rid of a touchscreen. It's still being counted by a computer in concealment. And another issue that they used to hijack the message was if you have bipartisan people in there watching the machine. Well, bipartisan is not what's in the Constitution. It says we, the people, in the Declaration of Independence. It's the public. So I'm never impressed when we have one Democrat and one Republican. So what? Unless the public is allowed, we haven't got what we need.
Well, Dr. Wiesner said, Bev, that don't even go down the road over the argument of security because you're never going to win it against the experts. That's the whole issue. They said it's not a matter of expertise, and in fact, that's the reason that we shouldn't even have these machines. It requires expertise that bring on the secrecy. But he said that's an argument that shouldn't even be approached. This is about public counts. And they kept it simple, which was, I thought, very smart.
And brilliantly, they cut the experts out of the picture. That's another hijacking of the talking point, saying, well, just turn it over to the experts, and the experts will tell the public whether it's safe. No. Public elections means the public, without any special expertise, can see that it's safe.
And I want to remind my listeners here today that this is another example of what we call the Hegelian dialectic, where you've got a problem and then you have to get a reaction. One thing the media did cover was the Chad counting in 2000 and what a mess that was, and the guy with the crossed eyes trying to, I mean, that picture was burned into our memories. So something must be done, and the media certainly was covering that. And the solution, of course, is the electronic voting machines, which in the case of, I believe, Bev, it was Orrin Hatch, who owned part of the voting company that was counting the votes in the election he was running in.
Oh, that was Chuck Hagel.
Chuck Hagel, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. And he's now wanting to switch over to he was a Republican, and now he's wanting to switch over and be part of the Obama administration, which I don't know. It all gets too complicated for me, and I think one of the things we can do is keep it very simple and say, look, this is about no essential part of the election. Remember, the German decision didn't just talk about counting. It said no essential part of the election should be concealed from the public, and that the public means the public without requirement for special expertise. It also debunks the notion that you can spot check a small proportion after the fact and everything's groovy. It basically says no procedure done after the fact is acceptable. It has to be the original counting of the votes that's public.
It's preventing it. But also, think about it, Bev, the experts were never allowed to see a fully functioning system, and they never told anyone. They just went along with it.
Oh, exactly. I just watched the Hacking Democracy movie that was about the black box voting work that has Kathleen in it. She's adorable in it. But I just caught this, expert on there going, I was the expert for the state of California, and I was not allowed to see that. Well, he didn't tell anyone for 15 years that he wasn't allowed to see it, and he was signing off on this stuff. Relying on experts to tell the public that public elections are okay is just another method of centralizing control into a few hands and away from the many hands.
Well, and the experts also tell us that the Earth will burn up with global warming in the next 2 years or 3 days or whatever it is. These are the so-called experts, which are bought and paid for, as we know, by the establishment. The conclusions have already been arrived at long before they do the research, as we all know. That is the problem, though. Americans look and they say, well, there's so many people voting now, and this isn't like it was in 1776. We just don't have the capacity to it'll take too long to find out who the winner of the election is. I'm willing to wait, to get the right result. Is that the problem? But hold on, Bev. Is that the problem? Americans are so impatient that they go for things like this?
Well, in New Hampshire, they do about half of the jurisdictions counting by hand in public, and the other half by machines. What shocks me is the two elections that I monitored very closely there, the hand counts always beat the machine counts. And this was very interesting because the machine counts, all they're supposed to have to do is push a button and the tape comes out, and then they've got the result. For some reason, that was taking 5, 6, 7 hours, and the hand counts were beating them. I don't even think that the evidence supports the idea that hand counting is slower.
Well, I think that was just put in there, Bev, to give everybody the impression that you can cheat easier with a hand count than a machine count.
Well, and you know what? There is some truth to that if you don't allow the public to see it.
Right. It has to be
the key to hand counting is you have to have public access to it, and the public has to be able to videotape, because there's a very simple way to cheat a hand count. And they did this in New Hampshire, by the way, in 2 jurisdictions with Ron Paul. They had a hand count. In one jurisdiction, they had 33 votes for Ron Paul. These are small jurisdictions. In one, they had 25. Well, they just wrote down 0 in each jurisdiction. So one simple way to cheat a hand count is to hand count in public and then just write the wrong number down and submit it. But if you would allow the public to videotape, that is pretty much blocked.
All right, folks, you're listening to a special edition of Deadline Live, the 7th day of October, 2009 this morning. Kathleen Wynne is with us, also Bev Harris. And when we come back from this break, we're going to be joined by the German physicist that made a lot of this happen in Germany. Germany has declared electronic voting is unconstitutional. Dr. Ulrich Wiesner will join us from Germany right after this. Stay tuned. Deadline Live exclusive.